All right, so my name is Lance Prado, and like you said, I'm the owner of Root River Rod Co. It's a fly shop in southeast Minnesota in Lanesboro, and we basically carry everything that a fly shop you would want at a fly shop. So flies, rods, reels, fly line. We also specialize in bamboo fly rods. My father-in-law, who started the fly shop, used to make bamboo fly rods from scratch. And we still buy and sell bamboo rods, new and used. And so if you're looking to get into fly fishing, I know there's sounds like a couple of newer guys here, but we have everything to help get you started, plus a handful of guides that will get you going and certified casting instructors. So now we can just dig into what we're here for is the Minnesota Driftless bug hatches. And we're gonna go from spring.
Can you speak a little louder?
Yeah, we'll go Minnesota bug hatches. We'll do spring, summer, fall, and kind of cover a whole hatch chart. There's a million bugs in Minnesota and also the driftless area, so we can get started. We can do the next slide, please. So the driftless, if you're not familiar, is basically a unique area with a bunch of spring-fed creeks that run through. The driftless is where the great glaciers went around, is to sum it up shortly. It's full of rich aquatic insects that help keep the trout population sustained. And the bug hatches are great, but they are declining in some areas. So let's move to the next one. So there's a few major groups of insects that hatch that you can just count on like clockwork through the year. There's mayflies, which include blue-winged olives, sulfurs, PMDs, brown drakes, tricos. Those are the mayflies that you can always kind of count on. There's caddisflies, tan, black, green. Also there's some stoneflies. There's black stones, which are starting to hatch right now. There's midges, which are always around all year round. And then there's terrestrials, which happen kind of in the summertime, usually mid-June to late June to October. You can get a great terrestrial fly fishing day. So right now, the blue wings are just starting to come off. I just heard people say they saw blue wings yesterday. But the midges yesterday were really thick. There were people catching trout on dry flies, which is kind of the first of the year to have a really good dry fly hatch. But the caddis will be coming in maybe a month. So we can go to the next slide. So here is kind of a hatch chart that I made. It's very general. There's a ton of bugs in the driftless
I'm not
area.
getting a picture on Zoom.
Oh, what? I don't know, Joe. Were you getting a picture before?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah.
I'll do the arrow and see if there's.
It just tells a different participant. You have to use this, you can't use the screen.
Okay, right. So basically March is coming up, and
I
big
don't know.
mayflies hatching in March are blue-winged olives. These can range from size 20, 22 to 18, but most of the time I fish a size 18 blue-winged olive. That way I can at least see it on the water, which is very helpful. Which they get hard to see, but you'll see a lot of fish kind of dimpling the surface and look like, you know, for people that are new to this, you'll see fish kind of dimpling the surface. They're usually sipping blueing olives, a real small mayfly. It is hard to see flying in the air most of the time, but that's what they're eating. And stoneflies, typically what I see stoneflies is that they'll kind of crawl out onto the banks. So nymphing with this black stonefly, a pheasant tail, a black copper john, regular copper john, those flies work very well this time of year. So to rig up right now would be, you know, some sort of pheasant tail stonefly looking imitation with the blueing olive off of that. And then also scuds, which just kind of live on the bottom of under rocks. They're freshwater creation. So then as we get into April, still we'll have blueing olives, we'll have Hendricksons, we'll get black caddis.
What size on the early black stone?
Oh, on the black stones, I would fish 18 to 16 size. You could even throw a 14. And if you want to use like a tractor, you could go with a size 12, bigger fly. But the majority of them that hatch are kind of the 16, I would say, and they crawl up on the bank. Usually when there's snow, but most of the snow melted today, you can see them crawling up onto the bank, and it's really easy to see. It looks like the bank's kind of just dirty, but when you get up close, they're just little black bugs crawling around. So for the bugs, yeah, black stone, size 16, and you'll be golden. And then April, same sizes on the blueing olives and the Hendricksons for dry flies. The stone flies are kind of done by then, but you can still use them nymphing for sure. And then as you can see, midges go out the whole year. So a size 18 zebra midge classic fly will work all the time. Black or red is also my favorite color to use as a midge. And then terrestrials, obviously it's very cold. They're not hatching, running around yet. So, but I've heard of people using, you know, a terrestrial fly and then using that as their indicator and then putting nymphs under that. And then fish will still come up and eat that bug, I think just because they're hungry. Maybe it's a big attractor, but so it's something that you don't have to not do, but it's not common to use right now. So once we get into May, we get some sulfurs and some PMDs, some pale morning duns. Green caddis, they kind of go from black to green, and then through the summer it's tan, brown. And then stoneflies, we get some yellow sallies. I've even seen a few salmon flies around, but not enough to really do anything for the trout to bring up a bunch of trout to rise on them. But the yellow sallies, they do. And so for sizes for yellow sallies, like a 16 to a 12, they're a bigger fly. Nymphing with those is great, or swinging a big soft hackle during May works very well. Big pheasant tail soft hackles, and that can cover your caddis emerger too. So you can get really good trout action swinging soft hackles during May. And then so once we get into June and July, we'll have PMDs, Cahills, light Cahills, brown drakes, which are my favorite dry fly for the year. It is a huge mayfly. It's the biggest one that we get of the year that's, you know, you can count on through the year, and they only last about a week. So you don't have much time to fish for them. Once you see one, you have to go out every night. It's something I tell my wife every year. I see one and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm going out. You're on kid duty tonight. So they come out during the evening, and so you have to fish basically the last hour or two of daylight, and then till you can't really see, and then walk out during the dark with a headlamp. But it is the funnest thing to fish in Minnesota, I would say. If it's the closest thing to fishing out west, because you're fishing a giant dry fly. and the fish that come up for those are big.
What size?
Those you can fish like a 10, 12, and an 8. Big dry flies. In our shop, we have the emergers, which work really well because when the brown drakes hatch, they'll come up and then they'll kind of flutter on the water for a long time before their wings dry and then take off and fly away. When then land in the grass and then mate and then redo it again. So the emerger fly, what I like to fish is what seems to catch the most trout, more so than an actual full-grown dun on top of the water. So then you can also fish golden stones. Those you can fish about a size 14. And then obviously you'll get caddis during the day, evening, and then in the mornings you can get good midge hatches. And then August is trico season, which a lot of people is kind of their favorite. It is also a very small fly. I would say one tip for fishing a trico is fishing a tandem rig. Put like a blueing olive in front of it with a high vis post on it. And then 20 inches behind that, put on your trico size 22. And then that way you can at least see the general area that your trico is in. Which it sounds like a lot of people, instead of just kind of casting and then guessing and then seeing a boil and thinking that's your fly and then setting on nothing, this will at least put you in the hula hoop area of where your fly is. So pro tip, fish a tandem rig, but fish a small, something with a high vis post and then put that behind it. And they'll even eat that bluing too, if you fish at size 18. Tan caddis, brown caddis too, which I didn't put on there, but brown caddis have kind of been my go-to just because I fished tan and olive my whole life, and then all of a sudden I found brown. It's a new color on the color wheel, so that one has been working very well for me. It's a size 16 brown caddis. You can literally fish that all day long. If you want to throw a dry fly and you're not sure what's going to happen, June, July, brown caddis, you'll be fine if you want some topwater action. And then we get back into some yellow sallies. They're not quite as thick in the fall, late summer, but again, midges through the whole year. But then it brings us into terrestrials, grasshoppers, beetles, ants, bees, wasps, all that stuff. Work just fine. Some of my favorite terrestrials is a hippie stomper. Like smaller sizes, I'll fish a size 12 hippie stomper. You can fish a pink, a black, an olive, basically any color that you like, yellow, and they seem to work pretty well. And then ants, whatever kind of foam ant you want to throw is great. And then, so then that brings us into September, October. We're back to bluing olives kind of being the top mayfly. Caddis, brown caddis. Every now and again, when you'll get a day or two just randomly where you get some big October caddis that come up. They're not quite something I count on all the time, but you do all of a sudden see these giant size 12 caddis on the water, and you're like, what is that? So you can fish bigger nymphs kind of in the fall. And then the terrestrials are still going, but as soon as that first week of frost, they're kind of done, I would say. But again, midges usually for me work best in the morning in the late summer, and then after that go to bigger nymphs, bigger flies. And then if it's really hot in the day, find streams that have lots of cover and then fish those terrestrials. You can do a hopper dropper, put your favorite nymph underneath it, according to size. I usually just start about 18 inches under your foam fly. So that's basically a very broad hatch chart. There's a ton of bugs, like I'll repeat myself a bunch, but very broad hatch chart that will get you through if you're just starting. We can go to the next one. And then there's also the meat hatch chart, which is all year round in my book, which includes big streamers like this one. And then also you can throw mice and catch trout at night, which is fun. We were just talking about it at my table that it is very scary, spooky. Fishing at night with mice, because walking through the stream to the stream at night with your headlamp on highlights everything that you don't see in the daytime, like all the big spider webs and giant spiders, the the bats, and also the snakes. For some reason, they just show up at night, and it's not fun. But catching the fish is very fun when you're just casting pure dark, and then all of a sudden something blows up and it's a big brown. But the one thing that will give you a heart attack is a beaver at nighttime. when they sneak up on you and then slap their tail like 10 feet away from you, you want to just scream and cry. But you can fish streamers at night. The fish will eat subsurface. The bigger browns feed at night. Lots of studies. I mean, Kelly Gallup's done a lot of big videos on big browns just hunt at night. That's sort of the thing. He even had a series trying to catch a 30-inch brown during the day and just couldn't do it. And it's hard to get a giant brown to eat during the day. You can catch, nice ones like this during the day, but ones upper 20s is very hard to do. So streamers that I recommend is, if you're just starting out streamers, just get a woolly bugger, black, and you can fish that, cast it, quarter downstream, 45 degrees, let it swing, and then all of a sudden, bam, there's a fish on. Once you start getting a little better at casting a streamer, it is hard for some people to start casting a fly that weighs a lot. But you can cast straight across and start stripping it in. Using a lot of different techniques. You can do what Kelly Gallup does, is kind of pop the rod and then strip your line. And then so you're not really stripping your line in, you're moving the line with your rod tip and then stripping in the slack. And that will give your fly a lot of good action. You can throw your fly straight upstream and twitch it down if you have a fly that's not very heavily weighted. That is a good technique. When you're getting spooky fish, use a long leader, cast it straight upstream, just twitch it coming down and then let it go past you. And then normally when you can kind of make this little J hook and then twitch it with your rod tip, big fish will come out and just smoke it. I just caught one yesterday on the exact same technique. I was showing the guys a picture of it, but I didn't have a picture of it, but it looked like that one. Yeah, so we can go to the next one. And then so basic fly selection, there's dry flies like blue wing olives I was talking about, size 16 to 20, sulfurs, elk hair caddis, tricos, nymphs, pheasant tails. These are just like the classic flies. Also the San Juan worm is, some people call it cheating, but it works very well. The emergers, soft hackles, terrestrials, hippie stompers, and then streamers, woolly buggers, and dungeons. And then there's prince nymphs like this. Don't bury it past the barb in your finger. Don't do that. And then this is like a newer style pheasant tail that I've been fishing the last few years. I'm sure, I don't know if you're into it, but the jig hook style flies is what I've really gotten into. And then putting CDC on my flies when I tie flies, it just gives the fly a whole new life. Fishing a classic pattern, but just with a little new twist. Tungsten bead, so that gets the fly down quick. And you can do this a few different styles of nymphing. You can tight line it with the Euro rod. You can fish it under an indicator, and you can fish it under a hopper or a bigger dry fly. But that CDC on the fly gives it a lot of life without doing anything else to it. And I've gone to barbless hooks after this incident. It's not fun when you have a little fly past the barb right on where your line goes, where you're stripping line. It's not fun. It just sucks. So
Pull on the drop further.
yeah, that's what I did. So pinch your barbs if you're catch and release. If you're not catch and release, you do whatever you want. That's fine. But pinch your barbs. It helps pulling the fly out of fish and also yourself. After guiding for a long time, normally I always pinch my barbs, but this is an old picture before I started guiding, and people were hooking themselves a lot. It happens more than you think. So pinch your barbs.
Do you find those jig flies get stuck on the bottom less too?
Yes,
Yeah,
I
do too.
I do. Yes. I snag a lot less, even though I'm fishing a heavier fly and just, grinding gravel is what we call it. I seem to lose a lot less flies with the jig style fly because it rides hook up for the most part. If you fish like a really heavy gauge hook, it'll kind of ride like this, but most of the time it'll ride pretty close to level. And then if you fish it, and then also another little tip, if you fish like a single fly with CDC on it and you do a loop knot, which not a lot of people do, like nymphing with, small tippet, but a loop knot, these little flies just wiggle so good in the water with the current. Gives it another life so that you can literally only fish one fly and just crush a bunch of fish. So and then also if you're Euro nymphing and getting into that, start with a heavier tippet than what you'll read on the internet, because a lot of people on the internet Euro nymphing are using 6X, 7X fluorocarbon tippet, but they're used to it. So when you're starting out, use like 4X, because you'll be feeling the bottom a lot. Even with a jig hook, you'll snag and lose it, and then also you're gonna break off a lot less fish. But just a little tip to throw in there. We'll go to the next one. And then, so fishing strategies, we'll kind of get into that, matching the hatch. So basically, when you walk to a stream, there's a few things you want to do at first is kind of observe the stream, where a riffle is coming in, how deep is the pool? Do you see fish rising? Do you see bugs? Were you kicking up bugs out of the grass like brown drakes when you walk through the grass? There's a ton of them, but caddis too will come out of the bushes, all of that. And then basically presentation, you can go a few ways. I would say the most important is matching size over the color and actual bug in the water. But so if you're getting caddis flies that are size 14, find a size 14 fly. That seems to work the best. It doesn't even have to be a caddis fly, but I would say that works well. But there's, if they're super picky, you can go to exact caddis pupa or emerger, whatever the trout is eating. And then just keep adjusting from there. So then basically, when you see fish like this one, that right there is a blueing olive that it is sucking in. I somehow got this picture this time last year. It was pretty sweet. But there was a bunch of blueing olives floating down the river, and these fish were just sipping them like this. So this fly is actually under the film of the water. I was fishing a dry fly on top of the water and getting refusals, and they would not take it. As soon as I put on an emerger and swung it under the film, I was catching fish left and right. And that 1 inch of difference was amazing to see on a day that I had all day to just kind of study the fish. So just adjust everything when you're fishing. If you're using an indicator before you change flies, slide your indicator up or down. The fish, you could be using the right fly, but you might be below them like 3 inches. Most of trout, when they're feeding, they're looking up or forward. They're not looking down most of the time. So when your flies are getting below them, they're not really going to dive down for them. So fish coming at them or even above them, and you'll catch more fish that way. So you don't always need to be directly on the bottom. Even this time of year, you can be pretty close, but the fish like to go up for their food. And then from there, after you adjust indicator, adjust your flies. If that's not working, you can really get picky and adjust tippet size, go down, say you're fishing 4X, go to 5X, and so on. Like with dry flies, I know like fishing tricos, a lot of people like to fish 6X, even 7X with tricos, but I've caught plenty of fish on 4X and a trico with the wide gap eye, and so it's up to the fish really, but just try and get it in their zone the best you can and just keep studying. Also, I forgot to mention, when you show up to a stream and you're looking for all the bugs coming off and everything, flip over the rocks, and then you can really study the nymphs that are underneath. The ones that are moving most are usually the ones that are hatching or soon to be hatching, but you should see a bunch of, blue-winged nymphs, caddis cases, stuff like that, stoneflies, and scuds. So that's kind of typical what you see under the rocks in southeast Minnesota. And then we can go to the next one. And then now to the decline of the insects. So like I said, when you flip over rocks, these are caddis cases. There's a few little bugs in here, which kind of got hard to see with this picture. It got blown out, but this is what a caddis case looks like. It looks like a little mini stick on the bottom. That's what the majority of them are. There are some caddis that make rock cases that are cool, but most of them just look like little sticks under the rock if you're new. But the decline of insects, there's pesticides. We could blame it on that. That's been washing into the river from farmland, from whatever, cattle, all of that stuff. There's pollution from gasoline off of cars, leaking oil, everything that's running in the sewer lines getting dumped into the rivers and creeks. Again, it's just, I don't know how to save it. And then there's also the habitat loss, which is from people developing, and then also I was talking earlier with my table that I've noticed on some of the streams that the new stream restoration work that we've done, I've seen the decline of bugs right after that for a few years. So that is something I would like to look into more, is just like each stream habitat we do and see how it affects the bugs. I know it does well for trout habitat, but the bugs that are there seem to decline on a few of them that I've noticed. So there's a few things which, it's all human based to blame, but Trout Unlimited does a very good job of trying to preserve water, keeping it clean, keeping easements so that we can fish and keep going after these trout, keep them stocked, the DNR, everybody's trying to do their best. So it sucks that the decline of mayflies have happened over the last 10 years. I've fished over 200 days for like the last 10 years, and I've seen the mayflies go downhill across the board basically, especially the last few years with low water, high temperatures. The bugs have not been very good, but caddisflies seem to always be the one that can live through that, but they are going down, so hopefully we can bring them back. We go to the next one, and then basically resources to understand all the bugs, and you can learn literally every bug in the upper Midwest with this book here. This is something that everyone should pick up if you're really looking to learn your insects. It has not only the nymphs in there, but it has the emergers and the dry flies. And then also in the back of the book, it has fly tying patterns and instructions, basically the recipe to tie each bug that she names in there. And it's cool, and she has it all categorized from mayflies to caddisflies, stoneflies, terrestrials, and so on. It's a very good book. You pick one up, you can read it forever. So basically, you can also call your local fly shop. You can call my shop, even though I'm 2 hours away from here. People call all the time, ask how the streams are, what's hatching, what's going on. We're happy to tell you what we think would be the best place to go for the day if you're going out that day, where we typically would fish or bring other people. And then there's the book, and then there's the DNR website. You can also go on there and call the DNR too. They will also give you as much information as they can. But that's just a few things. There's a few other fly shops in the Twin Cities area that I'm sure you're aware of. All of them are very helpful. And we all kind of communicate together as fly shops, as a little web, and just pass information on and on. So it's kind of their job at a fly shop to help, especially if you're new and they don't want to help, find another fly shop. but they all will help. They won't give away their secrets, I will say that, but they will get you on the water into some fishing zones where there's fish to be caught. So that's kind of the resources. Also YouTube, you can find a lot of information on YouTube. Basically how to tie all the flies, how to rig your rods, even to spots on YouTube. If you really want to get into it, you can scour YouTube and find spots just by watching YouTube and then going to it and then seeing how they caught their fish there, and then watch the background and you'll find the spot. So social media too, there's all of that, so check it out. So now that just brings us to the questions.
So feel free to questions in the room. When you ask your question, I'm going to repeat it so that people online can hear the question. And then Lance will answer. I'm not going to answer the question, right? You don't answer the question. Is there any? Okay, what's the question?
Yeah, I'm sure they'll be able
The
to.
question is that if we can share the presentation on the TU website, so at the end of each chapter meeting, we do publish the presentation, so you have access to it. Yes.
I got two questions. First, you mentioned, the hippy dippy, or what's that fly?
Hippie stomper.
Hippie stomp.
Yeah.
How do you tie one of those things on with all that foam in the way of the eye?
Okay, so the question is this hippie stomper, how do you tie that with all the material, not interfere with the eye of the hook?
So what I do is I typically will push that foam back and then thread your,
From the top?
yep, from the top, your leader, or tip it through, but you can fold that material back and it won't affect the fly at all. So
Those are hard to grip.
yeah, so just push that back, and you can push it back and hold it with your top finger and then just thread it through. And that's how I typically do it. So
I'm going down to Forestville tomorrow. What should I tie on?
I would have
The
scud.
question is,
Yeah,
where are you
yeah, go
going
ahead.
tomorrow? Somebody's going to Forestville tomorrow, and he wants to know what he should tie on.
I would have a scud, a midge, and a bluing olive colored fly, and fish those three for sure. And then have just, a classic pheasant tail, all of that. So
you.
Real quick, I have a question online from Steve Smith, and his question is, what are your recommended rods and lines to use?
Yeah. So for rods vary in price range. So if you have a price or you have no price, my favorite rod to fish is a Winston 9-foot 5-weight Air 2. I fish that all the time. I prefer a longer rod. I don't know why, maybe because I'm short, but a 9-foot rod works well for me. I know in the Driftless area, people like 8-foot, 7.5-foot, 4-weights. But my preference is a 9-foot 5-weight. But basically, rod brands, if you're budget rod, I would go with the Douglas Era. Get the 9-foot 5-weight or the 8-foot 4-weight, which is a really good rod. And then reels, same thing. You can spend as much money as you want, but a basic reel like a Reddington Run will work just fine for the driftless area. You're not going to use your drag that much, so they're there to hold your line. And then fly lines, I love fishing a Scientific Anglers Amplitude Infinity line. It's an all-purpose line. It's kind of a longer taper, so that works well for nymphing, for casting dries, and you can load up a long cast. But you can get very specific with your fly line. There's a lot of creek lines that if you're fishing real tight, small creeks, get, you know, a Rio Trout Creek line or SA Trout Creek line, and all the weight is in the head of the line, and that can, you know, load up your rod if you're using a little 7/8 weight rod or 7-foot rod, and you got a short cast with not a lot of line out. That will work well. But I would say the fly lines will alter the rod very much so. You could have a Winston, $1,200 Winston, and put a bad line on there, and that rod will cast horrible. So fly lines, I would say that's where you want to get really specific on what type of fishing you plan on doing the most, and then go with that over your rod and reel.
That's good advice. We're gonna take a few more questions in the room and then Chris will filter some questions online after. Yes?
I would say the hatches are very throughout the
Yeah.
And yes, so say again.
day.
So the question is there some times of days when the hatches are changing?
Yes, I would say I forgot to go over that, but right now during early spring season, between 11 and 3 o'clock, general area is going to be your blueing olive hatch. And then once you get into springtime, your caddis will kind of be same thing, but throughout the summer, your caddis go later and later during the day, so that you get the evening caddis hatch, but you'll kind of get morning mayflies is what you can kind of start to go by once we get into May. You can kind of start with morning mayflies and then evening caddis and then daytime terrestrials. So that's kind of the pattern.
Okay, one more question in the room, then we'll go online. Lee?
What do you do when you cast now? They tend to twist. It's still a little bigger, but usually I use 5X.
So the question is, when you casting crickets, bigger flies, and they tend to twist. So what's the strategy there? Go to a big, thicker tippet or lighter? So what
Yeah,
you say?
I would go to a thicker tippet. With terrestrials, I typically fish a 4X tippet. And if it's really bad, if you're fishing a giant terrestrial, you could throw on a micro swivel, and that will help not twist your line. A lot of time I fish a leader to a tippet ring, and then my tippet off of that, even on dry flies, even with tricos, I use a tippet ring. But a micro swivel will help keep from twisting, and then thicker line, you could throw 4X on there. And if you're fishing a bigger fly, the fish won't be as spooked by your line. They're looking at that fly and that splash that terrestrial makes. So don't worry about tippet size. Go thicker.
Okay, so do we have, Chris, if you're online, what are the questions that you have online? Are you the one fielding the questions? Okay.
Yeah, hey Eve. I'm out here in Cyberland. Got one here from Larry. Asks, what is your favorite searching pattern when there's no visible hatch or surface feeding going on? Do you have a searching pattern that you like?
Yeah, so if you don't see any fish rising and you're nymphing, I would say a blowtorch nymph, size 16 blowtorch nymph with a smaller nymph like a midge off of that. But a streamer, just go with the woolly bugger and just slap that in the water every chance you get. So those are my two go-tos that if I don't see anything hatching and I don't know the water, that's what I'm using, but the spot looks good, so.
Yeah, thank you. Another one, do you have some tips to avoid drag in your drift when you're throwing dry flies?
Yeah, I would say longer leader with thinner tippet will help get less drag. If you use a longer leader with thinner tippet at the end, you'll get a lot less drag. That means a lot less fly line on the water, which is pulling your flies down faster. And that thinner tippet will cut through the water easier. So if you can go thinner that way, I know it's tough with terrestrials like we were saying, but you know, if you're fishing a caddisfly, go with the thinner tippet, longer, and that will reduce the drag.
Gotcha. Do you ever fish like in the trico hatch? I know I've seen guys fish downstream sometimes. And do those kind of like a pile cast and get a bunch of line going downstream. Do you ever do that?
Yep. We'll fish that way. We can fish downstream to them. If they're really spooky and you're spooking them before you get your line over them, you can do that way. And you can get a lot of line out and kind of let your fly drift down to them. But that can get tough depending on how far of a drift you're trying to make. And then setting on that fish makes it tougher when you fish downstream to them because a lot of time you're just pulling it right out of their mouth. But I do that sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. Had a question about the hex hatch. Have you gone down that rabbit hole trying to find those guys? And do you have any advice as far as locations for trying to find hex?
I will say the hex hatch in the last 3 years has been sad to see in Lanesboro. It used to be pretty good. It would only happen 2 nights of the year, but you'd wake up the one morning and the sidewalk in front of the shop would be full of hexes and that you would have to sweep it off. But the last 3 years, I've seen like 2 hexes stuck on cobwebs in the window. You used to be able to fish for them right in Lanesboro below the dam. They would come up above the dam and then land below the dam and you could fish them. And now the last 3 years, it hasn't been great. So I would say you could go northern Wisconsin to the Brule, fish the hexes, but you'll be there with every other Minnesota license plate. So
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that is one of the sad things we've been hearing, especially those really big bugs, that there's been some big decreases. That's all we've got online here.
I think we have more questions in the room. You mentioned about a swing and a merger.
yeah.
Could you describe that a little bit more for me? And maybe the type of water that you'd use that in? So the tippet.
Yep.
Don't make it your question too long because I'm not gonna remember. Repeat that. So as far as the question is, fishing a merger, like what's
Soft tackle.
soft tackle. He wants to know more about the technique on how to fish that fly, and what was the rest of the question?
Lead, yeah.
Okay,
lead-
I think I got it.
Yeah, it's good enough. So in fishing a soft tackle emerger fly, easiest way to do it is cast 45 degrees downstream. Let the current take your fly. Keep your hand off the fly line. That's rule number one. You always either break the fish, break it off, or just yank it out of their mouth. Hand off the fly line and just let the drag do the work, but the fish will set itself. So when you cast 45 down, you just let your fly swing across, and you're looking for steady moving water to even a little bit quicker water, not super riffly, but pretty good moving water where it's going to take that fly. And then as far as the leader setup, you can go with the standard 9-foot 5X leader with 5X or 6X tippet, or a 9-foot 4X leader with 4 to 6X tippet on the end of it, depending on what size soft tackle you're swinging. And then another way, instead of just letting it swing, you can cast 45 down and throw a mend in it, and then that will slow the drift down across the top of the water. And then you'll get a longer in the fish zone. But swinging it across it's super simple. Just downstream a little bit and let the current take it, and keep your hand off the reel. Yes.
2-inch, 3-inch.
Yep. Yeah, all the soft tackles, or the majority of them that I fish, are unweighted. But you don't put floating on it, and you just let it swing, and they're eating right below the surface. I mean, a trout, once you kind of study how a fish eats, you'll see that if they jump really high out of the water, a lot of time what they're doing is catching that emerger on the way up and eating it and then flying out of the water. When they're dimpling like that picture I saw, they're kind of either sucking it when they're just under the film or taking it right off the top. But a trout pattern, you can kind of see how they're eating. And if you don't see the bugs floating on top of the water, but you see them jumping up, they're eating that emerger. So hopefully that
More
answered.
question? What's your question?
Yeah, I was wondering about your philosophy about fishing midges. I know you said something about zebra midges.
Yes.
Mostly I've never caught very much on midges. You see them out later in the evening.
Yeah.
Got different colors, but I don't. Anyway, you have, other than whatever you have to say, I'm interested.
Yeah.
So the question is about midges. So zebra midge, another midge. Which one do you pick, and how do you fish those?
So you can fish it a ton of different ways. This time of year, you can fish as unweighted zebra midge, pretty close to the surface, with like just a single fly. Just cast it upstream, light indicator, but you can move that indicator pretty far away from, deeper than what it actually is. But that way you can at least detect a strike. You can also fish them off another fly like a scud and get it down deep. But basically what you're looking for is just to get that fly in the strike zone where the fish are. Like I said, this time of year, they're not always on the bottom. Even though the water's cold, they're not going to be right near the bottom. So if you can get that fly right kind of in their face or above them, they'll eat it. But unweighted midge right now, or a lightly weighted midge, works well.
So are you trying to cast that drag free, or have it float drag free?
No, I'm fishing it under indicator, yeah, and just dead drifting it basically. So just like you would fish it, any other nymph, but if you're fishing the unweighted fly, move that indicator further away.
More questions? No. Okay. Only one question for Natalie.
Yeah.
So the question is, keeping your hand off the line, so what? Let's
Swing-
elaborate a little bit about that.
So when you're swinging a soft tackle across the river, cast across, and then hand off the line and reel, and your drag not that tight, so that when the fish and your rod just level with the river, and so when that fish takes, it has a little forgiveness to take a line off the reel. You could even point your rod tip up a little bit, and that'll help ease it a little bit because your line is tight to them already, so they're grabbing it and turning downstream, and that's what's breaking them off. If you have your hand on there and you're pulling the opposite when they're pulling, that's how it's getting broken off or yanked out of their mouth. So just try to do nothing. It's so simple and it's so hard at the same time because you want to grab the reel and you want to pull back and set the hook. Yeah, you can, there will be a bow in the line, but a lot of times I will do that upstream mend and kind of keep the line more straight, a little bit slower drift, but
Do you strip out like exactly the amount you want cast out then?
yeah, say if I'm standing over here, I will strip out enough to hit that bank at a 45-degree angle and cast that and then let it swing across the whole stream, just like you would like for a steel. Let it go straight, and then once you get straight downstream from you, then strip it back up and make the next cast. But that's how much line. You can fish shorter line if you know there's a pot of fish only in the middle, but I guarantee the biggest fish is tucked under the bank over there. Yeah, just past where your ability to cast.
One more question. So Chris, you got one more question online?
Yes, thank you. Wonder if you could say a bit more about what hatches happen at what times of day. Maybe focus on like some of the ones coming up in the
Answered that
spring
question
here.
already.
Yeah.
If you want to answer the same, give the same answer.
Yeah.
Well, he was saying specifically for spring.
For spring, yeah. Okay, so springtime, blue wing olives, 11 to 3, you want to be on the water. The hatch could be from 12 to 2, but 11 to 3 or 4, you want to be on the water from now until May to hit your blue wing olive hatch. Mother's Day, the caddisfly hatch will kind of start the similar time, 10:30 throughout the day, and usually cuts off around 4. But early springtime, the warmest part of the day is when you want to be on the water for hatches. But soon as Mother's Day caddis hatch happens, that's kind of all day for the most part. And then after that, you're in May time, it's kind of early afternoon, and then just keeps getting later and later throughout the year. So
Do you
Okay.
find that nymphing's pretty much something you can do all the time?
yeah, nymphing you can do all year round easily. That is the most effective way to catch trout is nymphing. Do it simple, get an indicator. If you're just starting out, an indicator, 1 fly, less tangles, 2 flies when you can, manage that a little bit better. In Minnesota, you can fish 3 hooks. You can fish 3 flies, but that's a nightmare to untangle. So just 1 or 2 flies, keep it simple, indicator. And when you're nymphing with the indicator, general rule of thumb, just do like 1.5 times the depth that you're fishing is what I go by. And that's what you'll start out as. And depending on how heavy your flies are, if they're tungsten both, you might just hit bottom right away and have to adjust, but 1.5 times, just based on current drag from the top and your flies weighted down on the bottom, because your flies will be at an angle slightly. So that's why you need a little more.
Do you use split shot a lot?
No, I've gone away from slit shot and have gone to tungsten beaded flies. I've tried to not use split shot
Okay, we'll
anymore.
start with Steve and then we'll go after with you after. So the question is that as if he fished Marge Brown in Lanesboro,
Not a lot anymore. Last year I saw a handful of March Browns guiding. They're on the streams that I was fishing. They weren't that great. You would see them out, but did you? Yeah, on certain streams, that's the thing, is that this whole thing is just kind of general. Each stream has its own life cycle of bugs. So, yeah, the streams you were on could have good March Browns, and the ones I were on, not great. But so this is just general across the board. Each stream acts very different. Even when you step into Wisconsin Driftless, those streams are almost night and day compared to what we have down in Lanesboro. So.
you had a question?
When you're nymphing with the jig nymphs that are often on barbless hooks,
Yeah.
if that's your top fly and you want to drop her behind that, how do you avoid it, the dropper coming off of the hook bed?
Okay, so the question is when you fish with
go back to that?
barbless hook and then you try to attach a fly next to that, so how do you make sure that it doesn't get off the hook, the barbless hook?
Right here. So what I do is I will tie both tippet and leader on the hook eye. You can tie to this, but your knot has to be very tight because it will slide off. Everyone's had that problem, but I tie to the hook eye, and that avoids it, and it doesn't affect it too much. Fishing wise, I've noticed that I still catch a bunch of fish on that upper fly, but that completely eliminates accidentally losing a fish because it slipped off. So.
Oh, you have a question?
Actually, I don't have a question. I just have a comment, if I may. I met Lance a couple of years ago. My brother comes up from Florida and we fly fish. And Lance took us out, didn't know him real well. Went out in his drift boat for the day. And what happened was we took off in Lanesboro, right below the dam, fished trout all morning long, met where the confluence of another stream came in. All of a sudden started fishing smallmouth all afternoon. And if you're looking for a good guide, Lance was just great. He's got a great personality. He's very patient. He was very good at teaching the two of us, especially my brother, you know it is. But anyway, just really a top-notch. And I find, even though I know it costs money to do it, the benefit and how I grow as a fisherman when you're out with a guide. So if you're ever down there, I highly recommend Lance. He was really top drawer.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I get a fly when I do that?
Yeah.
Looks like seems like it was set up.
Yeah.
No?
No,
I was gonna mention that I watched some of your YouTube videos and was saying that maybe we should tell everyone that you do like drifting, and I don't remember if you mentioned it.
yeah, I didn't even talk about really our guiding aspect and all of that, but we do offer drift boats for trout and smallmouth in the same day or full days of each. That is our big highlight of our fly shop. We kind of pioneered the guiding drift boat scene in Southeast Minnesota. I've been doing it for a long time. We also do the classic walk and wade trips. And then for us, since we've been drift boat float fishing for a long time, we have a lot of private boat ramps that we can dump our boat in and take out, which is great because Southeast Minnesota boat launches don't exist. They're all technically canoe launches. So, and there's only a couple of them. So you're limited if you're just going down there to fish on your own with your own boat or raft. So us having private access is awesome. We've got really good stretches tailored out where do a half day, half trout, half bass, a full day of bass, full day of trout. You can fish dry flies in May from the drift boat just like you would out west. Or you can strip streamers or nymph, but I didn't really plug that in here, just kind of stuck to the main.
What
the
about I
main
have a
thing.
question for the bass? They're not active early in the year. The water needs to warm up, right?
So I would say since we're a little different than the Mississippi, since ours is spring fed, the bass kind of will be pretty active earlier than the Mississippi or other bass streams, warm water streams, because they just get cold and freeze. So we have a more constant temperature and the bass kind of stay more active, but they're not a giant Mississippi bass, but you can catch some decent ones. We've caught, 20-inch bass, smallmouth, but it's not consistent like you would find on upper Mississippi.
Okay, I think that was a question there.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask, you talked earlier about how there's kind of this trend of like throwing soft tackle on everything, right? And I've seen that evolve into like people even tying like micro streamers, like micro woolly bugger jigs.
Yeah.
So like, have you gotten into that? And then the second part of that is like, if you're fishing some still water, are you actually gonna start to like strip or manipulate that nymph like a streamer?
So there was questions about micro streamer, how to fish those, and also if you fish on still water. So how is the technique about moving that fly?
Yeah, so with that CDC on there and like still water or even slow moving water, you can actually you can twitch that indicator, or if you're tight lining, twitch it, and that will make fish react to it. And just like this, I've casted it out and stripped it off the boat just like a streamer and caught fish just like that. Especially when that soft tackle is working the best, but we're floating in a boat and you can't really, you're floating the same speed, you can't let your fly line swing. I have clients all the time just cast straight at the bank like a streamer and short little strips with the soft tackle, and they crush it. So yes to both.
We already used like a black woolly bugger and then a fly like that off the end of it and just dead drift it, like with an indicator. I've had pretty good luck on some of the south range.
Yep, done that.
Okay, so there's a tip. Somebody in the room gave a tip, like a woolly booger with a smaller fly, a trailing smaller fly behind, and strip that, and it works.
I just dead drift.
Dead drift it? Okay.
Under indicator.
Yeah.
Yeah. So doing that technique works well. Especially like say today all the snow melted and the fish are lethargic, but you still want to fish a streamer. Throw indicator on, throw a big sloppy cast with a lot of line out, and do a lot of big sloppy mins. And each min is a little twitch in that fly, and then just wait for that indicator to shoot down, and that's your fish. That's normally how I fish a streamer under indicator.
Okay. That's it. No more question. Okay. Maybe one more. Okay, there was one more question, and then we'll call it a night.
Yeah,
There's questions about the streams to go fish.
Yeah, there's a ton of streams. I'll just name a few that we send people to. Like the South Fork is good. That's a good size stream. It's forgiving for the size. There's Dushy Creek. There's Gribbon Creek. Those are a couple good ones. And then, through the Root River, through Lanesboro and Preston, Camp Creek that dumps into Preston, you can walk up that pretty easily. And then in Forestville, you can fish that. And then, so there's a few streams. They're all pretty good. The DNR makes a map book, which you probably have. And what I tell people is you could flip that open to any page and throw a dart at it, and you'll have a good time for the most part. Yeah, so you can drift a few other ones. I can't name, but there's a couple others that we've discovered that you can drift, but the Root is the main one you can float. So
okay, I think we'll call it tonight, Lance. Thank you so much. We learned a lot tonight.
Yeah.
And make sure you pay your bill before you leave, because I don't want to get stuck with all your bills. Thank you very much. Drive safely tonight.
Paul Johnson flies.